Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to spend just a few minutes today speaking with my colleagues and also with Tennesseans about an issue that we hear so very much about every single day, and the issue continues to persist. It is our border, and we all know, and indeed you read in news count after news count, yes, indeed, there is a crisis at our border. And just a few months ago, we had some of our friends that are in the other chamber that kept saying, oh, this is manufactured, oh, there's nothing to it. But as we hear from law enforcement professionals, as we hear from ICE, from DHS, from the Border Patrol, we have a crisis. Our border is strained to the breaking point. The real humanitarian crisis at the border is escalating. There are people who are being brought in through Central America, through Mexico, and they are stranded in the desert without food, without water. During the summer, sometimes you have temperatures above 100 degrees. So our border is at a breaking point, and it is indeed time for this body to do something about it, to support these agencies that are on the front line dealing with this crisis every single day. Now, what we know from our hearing that we held yesterday at the Senate Judiciary Committee is that ICE is facing mounting challenges when it comes to expediting the deportations that need to take place. Abuse and exploitation of the asylum process overburdens our court system as illegal immigrants flood our borders, claiming persecution. Our country historically welcomes people who are fleeing political persecution. But there has got to be tighter rules on these asylum seekers. The percentage of those who have valid asylum claims is actually relatively low compared to the number that are applying for these protections. I will tell you, I welcome President Trump's moves to raise the standards. Last week, the president directed the Department of Homeland Security to enact several new asylum changes. As part of these new policies, the president imposed a new deadline for the immigration courts to meet. He directed that cases in immigration courts be settled within 180 days of those being filed. Tennesseans want to see government accountability. They want to see it across every agency. And certainly when it comes to immigration policy, they want this accountability. And they know that with a 6-month deadline, it is exactly the kind of accountability that is needed. Here is the problem that ICE is facing when it comes to meeting that 180-day standard. Right now, as of yesterday at our hearing, they had more than 800,000 cases that were pending. Think about that. Think about that. If your court system has 800,000 cases that are pending. Now, there are exactly 400 immigration judges that are there to hear these 800,000 cases. Do the math on that. Think about how many cases that would be. It is a 2-year wait at this point to get the case heard. So ICE needs additional judges. That means they need additional officers. That means they need additional funding in order to meet the load. So I asked Director Asher how long it would take them to ramp up in order to be able to hear these 800,000 cases. And she said months, maybe a year, maybe a little bit longer. It depends on when they get the authorization to expand the court system. It depends on when they get the funding for it. And all of this time, what continues to happen? Cases continue to be piled onto that backlog. If we took action today, and if we approved their ability to expand their capacity, to have more judges, to have more agents, to have more officers, to have more resources, it would be a year. By the time we work through this process, it might be as many as 1.5 million cases that they are working. So, Mr. President, this is one of the reasons that it is imperative that we close some of the loopholes that are being used in the asylum process and work through closing these loopholes to help secure this border. It is something that would be of assistance to those that are trying to meet the need that is there from people crushing our border, putting that foot on American soil and claiming asylum and persecution. Now, another thing we talked about in yesterday's hearing is trafficking. We all know that cartels are big business. Cartels deal in trafficking drugs. They deal in trafficking human beings, which is disgusting. And they look at human beings and moving them for labor trafficking and for sex trafficking and for gangs. They look at that as part of their business. I'm one of those. I know Senator Cruz has talked at times about his El Chapo Act, which would allow those seized assets from these drug lords to be used to help pay to secure that border. Because stopping this trafficking is something that is an imperative. You know, it really is true that until we secure this southern border, every town is, in essence, a border town, and every state is a border state, because illegal immigration no longer is a problem that is confined to those states that are on the border. We see this all across our country, and it is heartbreaking. When you talk about the trafficking of human beings, the sex trafficking, the effect that has on girls, when you talk about the drug trafficking and the heartbreaking effects that that has on families in every single one of our communities. Opioids, fentanyl, heroin, we all see it. God bless our local law enforcement. Next week we're going to honor our law enforcement, but God bless them for the work that they do in our communities. Here is a good example. Just this past January, our Customs and Border Patrol seized the largest amount of fentanyl in the agency's history, ever. Largest amount. They seized nearly 254 pounds in fentanyl from a Mexican national trying to enter the U.S. It was enough to kill more than 115 million people. That's the volume that one person was bringing over. Enough fentanyl to kill 115 million people. This is why we have to make certain that we secure that border. As I mentioned, the trafficking of human beings that is taking place. And another of the problems in that, Mr. President, is that many adult sponsors who are seeking custody of children or posing with custody of children, they are here illegally themselves. The traffickers have adults grab a child, they're coming to the border, the child is then transferred to someone else in the country, and that individual is here illegally. And it is difficult to find out how that child is connected to the adult that they're taken to. Sometimes it could be a labor gang, sometimes it could be a prostitution ring, we don't know. But I commend Department of Homeland Security and Health and Human Services. They're taking steps to close a big loophole here. And last April, the two agencies entered into an agreement to ensure that relatives of these children are not above the law. Under the agreement, DHS and HHS promised to share information about these adult sponsors so that ICE can run criminal and immigration background checks on them. This agreement is a powerful tool in the fight to stop trafficking of migrant children. So long as law enforcement can keep running these criminal background checks on these sponsors, we can hold more adults accountable and keep these children safe. Finally, I want to touch on the wall because Border Patrol Chief Provost told me during the hearing yesterday that the wall was working. San Diego sector has 14 miles of the new double fencing that has been approved by Congress. It's the first of the sections of the new walls. Previously, some of the old walls were 6 feet high. They were made out of landing mats, and they were not successful in deterring illegal entry. The new walls are 30 feet high, and they stand on steel bollards. The barrier is making it tougher for illegal immigrants to sneak across, and it is helping our agents. You know, our agents have told us repeatedly, not for the last few months or the last couple of years, but get this, for 20 years, they have said, we need 3 things. We need a barrier, we need better technology, and we need more agents and officers on the ground. These men and women deserve our best efforts, and we should be giving them what they need. Our immigration system is full of legal loopholes, physical vulnerabilities. I applaud the President's new asylum changes, and I urge each of my colleagues to support law enforcement's needs. They are consistent in asking for these 3 things: barriers, technology, and agents. This is what they need in order to help keep our nation safe. So as we consider how much we value our safe communities, how much we want our communities to be safe and happy and prosperous, I encourage us each to think about these agents that are working to protect that southern border, to deal with human trafficking, to deal with sex trafficking, and to keep illegal drugs off our streets. Thank you so much, Mr. President. I yield my time.